forests, etc. This is in this experience there are previous knowledge, the American experience, our experience, very connection with the proposal, no, the Union, Europe, the North American, the Latin American state, no, very connecting knowledge with this experience, and this experience express change in our policies to protection the environmental, the climate change, new last 20th century, in 21st century, of course, this climate change is part in general, no, the public policy, the Latin American state, in Peru, for example, but there are distance, no, between the law and the facts, no. There are all countries now. This experience is similar in Latin America, and the other could be the cultural approach, because there are people, no, there are original nation, no, the people who live in Amazonia is before the Hispanic conquest, before the Western, no, experience in Latin America, no. So this is anthropological cultural approach, very important in general for South America, Brazil, Peru, Colombia, but as Europe, there are authorities conservatives, authorities liberal, no? Is more less strong this approach, no? Omen will leave a tour, no? You know, no? RAM is a model for some countries in the south, no? This is a change to approach, no? And now the rights, no, the right approach, the right experience to the states and the public policies. So the environmental law, the environmental approach, this moment very difficult time, no?
So yes, I think where I might start, I've sent you my slides, Hector, in case you can find them.
Wait a minute, please. Yes. Wait a minute to share, please. Wait a minute. No. So I believe it will be important for you to visit South America, to know our South American experience in your academic area. University has experience with the Sao Paulo University. My seminar local experience in the environmental law. Wait a moment with the present.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hector. So
you can see?
There we go. Yes, very good. Can everyone see that? Andres, can you see that as well?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, Hector has more luck than me. So that first slide, you can see that's a picture of my university, University College London, UCL. And I don't know if any of you have heard of our university, but it is quite a big university in the United Kingdom. Can we put that on the slideshow mode? Is that possible? Hector, you press that little magic PowerPoint button. Okay, I don't know if we can get it into slideshow mode. But what I was the reason I put this slide up is that our university, we're very proud of UCL in the United Kingdom because we think it's a very excellent university. And we got a big award in 2024 for being University of the Year in the United Kingdom. But part of the reason why we are very proud of UCL is that it's nearly 200 years old. Now, I've realized, by contrast with your amazing university, the National University of San Marcos, my university is not very old at all. It's very young. So it was really, I think, engaging with these long-standing institutions in Latin America is very important for a university like mine, which is relatively young, even though quite well known. So I was going to tell you a little bit about my law school and then get into my environmental law topic, if that's all right. Andres, do you want to summarize that for everyone? That kind of introductory note.
Sí, aquí, por ejemplo, estamos poniendo una imagen de la universidad donde yo trabajo, la universidad aquí en Londres. No sé si habrán oído de ella, pero es una universidad importante aquí en Reino Unido. Y la razón por la que he puesto esta diapositiva es porque es una universidad en la que estamos muy orgullosos de ella. Incluso obtuvimos un premio por excelencia para la universidad en el 2024, considerada la Universidad del Año. Y también parte de la razón del orgullo es porque nuestra universidad ya tiene 200 años de haber sido fundada. Ahora entiendo muy bien que al contrastarlo con la Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos, no es una universidad muy, digamos, antigua tampoco, sino una muy joven en realidad. Por lo cual pienso que es muy importante que podamos tener estos encuentros con las instituciones latinoamericanas, debido a que la mía, por supuesto, será muy joven, pero también es bien conocida. Y también, si pudiera, quisiera, por favor, decirles un poco más acerca de la escuela de ley, de donde yo he salido, y después para poder hablar acerca del tópico de ley ambiental.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, I have to say, I'm not going to understand what you're saying, but that generally picked up some of the key words. So thank you very much. My Spanish is terrible. I can speak French, but no Spanish. So the next, don't need to translate that. So next slide. This is so I am a professor of environmental law, but I'm also dean of my law school. I run the faculty. And I'm very proud of the fact that in the United Kingdom, which has big universities and law schools like Oxford and Cambridge and the London School of Economics, that at the moment, the UCL Faculty of Laws, on many measures, is either the #1 or #2 law school. And in particular, the one I'm most proud of is that we have the best quality of research in the United Kingdom. So that's just a bit of a kind of a sketch of where we are as a law school at UCL. You can be very brief on that, Andres.
Yes. Bueno, yo soy entonces profesora de ley ambiental. También soy decana entonces también del departamento de ley en la escuela en sí. Yo soy la que está guiando entonces la facultad y estoy muy orgullosa de ese hecho también que en el Reino Unido, donde hay varias universidades y escuelas de leyes, tal como la Escuela de Economía de Londres, Cambridge u Oxford también, somos nosotros los que nos consideramos como la escuela de leyes número 1 o por lo menos número 2 en el país. Es algo en lo que tenemos mucho orgullo, también tenemos la mejor tipo de calidad cuando se trata de investigación en el Reino Unido. Y esto era un poco entonces la información que queríamos que tuviera acerca de cómo es que nos encontramos ahorita como escuela de leyes.
Fantastic. So a couple of things to pick out about our faculty. As I said, we're the #1 rated research faculty for law in the UK. We also work in the common law system, and London and England are often seen as the centre of the common law world. And that's, I think, one of the really interesting things to think about in exchanging ideas across a country like Peru and your university and mine in the law schools. We're exchanging views across the civilian and common law traditions. And I think there's some always important lessons to learn there. Being in London is kind of, a legal centre globally, which is very enriching for not just for the academics who work here, but for our students. We try very hard to be very supportive. We're a very excellent law school, but we're quite small. We try not to get too big so that we can maintain our excellence and we can look after our students. I know that there are some students here today. Our student law societies are exceptional and very active, and we do a lot of pro bono work in the community, working to support charities and people with legal needs in the community, and we're also very committed to that. So that's just a bit about our faculty. Andres, again, can be very brief on that.
Entonces, hay un par de cosas que se tiene que saber de nuestra facultad. Primero es de que cuando se trata también de investigación en la Facultad de Leyes también en Reino Unido, somos el número uno, se podría decir. Investigamos tanto el sistema de ley común, tanto en Londres como en Inglaterra, como somos el centro también del mundo de la mancomunidad. Es algo muy interesante cuando se empieza a pensar, sobre todo cuando se trata de intercambio de ideas en el país, sobre todo como con Perú aquí, con universidades como la de ustedes y la mía también. Todas las escuelas de leyes pueden hacer intercambio de ideas y de vistas, tanto en ley común, ley civil, y tener muchas importantes lecciones que aprender también. Siendo Londres uno de los centros legales también, hay muchos factores que pueden enriquecer tanto estudios académicos y sobre todo para los estudiantes. Nosotros tratamos de apoyar sobre todo, es decir, entendemos de que nuestra facultad, nuestra escuela es un poco pequeña tal vez, pero mantenemos nuestra excelencia ahí. Sobre todo para los estudiantes que estamos aquí, son muchos los que son excepcionales. Y también hacemos mucho trabajo pro bono o gratuito, como se podría decir. Nos mantenemos activos. Sobre todo también todo tipo de trabajos para apoyar a las caridades y las necesidades legales para en común. Nos mantenemos siempre comprometidos con ello.
Fantastic. So if we go through, I don't know if you do the Jessup. Do you do Jessup in your law faculty, where you go and do mooting? Is that something that Andres, do you know?
I do apologize, I would not know. If you like...
Okay, sounds like someone might know what I'm talking about. But that is something we take mooting very seriously, which is like doing pretend court cases. What I wanted to tell, before I get onto my research, just a little bit about our LLM, which is our master's program, because that's where we have some really amazing students from Latin America, not so much from Peru. So that could, but I wanted to show you a few things about the faculty's existing connections with existing and growing connections with Latin America. So if you go down a couple of slides. Hector, if you could just go down. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Keep going. So here, what's interesting is every year we have students from over 80 countries that come and study with us. And we have a tradition of students from Latin America, mainly from Chile, and mainly studying competition law, which is, so we have these incredible students who come from, who have come from Chile, particularly, but also from other parts of Latin America, and also on our PhD program, actually. But that is something I wanted to note. If you, Andres, I'll just do the next two slides and then you can summarize. Hector, if you could go down. One of the reasons why we have lots of people coming to study with us from all around the world, if you go down to the next slide, which has the specialisms, this is why people come and study with us to do, and I'm sure you have something similar in your law school, these different areas of specialism. So my area of specialism is environmental law and policy, and we have these fabulous students who come and learn with us from around the world. And as I said, the competition law one there that I've put up is where we actually get quite a lot of colleagues who who come from Latin America at the moment. Andres, do you want to just summarize that kind of point and connection with the students who come and join us in London?
Antes de que pueda mencionarles acerca de mi investigación, quiero hablarles acerca del programa de maestro de leyes o maestría, donde tenemos excelentes y maravillosos estudiantes de América Latina, no de Perú en sí, pero quiero mostrarle acerca de que sí pueden existir muchos que vienen de diferentes partes de América Latina. Por ejemplo, vemos de que muchos estudian con nosotros, tanto estudios de tradición o estudios de América Latina, muchas veces vienen de Chile. Y en realidad muchas de las razones por las que vienen es debido a esto, porque tenemos muchas áreas de especialización que se pueden usar para investigación. La mía se trata acerca de ley ambiental y política y póliza. Y como decimos, hay mucha competencia y para obtener muchos colegas de América Latina y muchos estudiantes aprenden con nosotros.
Great. And the next slide, I just wanted to show two nice points of connection before I get into talking about my research. So we, because we have people researching and studying from all over the world in our law school, we put a lot of effort into global partnerships and connections. And this year, we have set up 2 partnerships in Latin America, which I hope there will be more. One is we have a research partnership with the University of Chile, and the other is we have an internship for students at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Buenos Aires, which has been very exciting to set up for our students. You may have a similar arrangement in your law school. But on the back of that, I am very keen to come and visit our existing partners, but also I would be absolutely delighted to come and visit Peru, as you suggested, Hector, in your opening remarks.
Entonces, en las siguientes quisiera mencionar 2 puntos de conexiones, porque vemos que hay bastantes personas que nos ayudan con investigación alrededor del mundo en sus diferentes escuelas de leyes, y también se ha puesto mucho esfuerzo para crear conexiones y también, no solamente conexiones, sino comparaciones también con diferentes universidades también en América Latina. Esperemos también que haya más. Sobre todo tenemos con una investigación, tenemos hay compañías de investigación con la Universidad de Chile y también con el Departamento de Arbitración, también con Buenos Aires, lo cual fue muy emocionante el poder preparar. Y tal es posible que haya algo similar también en la Escuela de Leyes allí en Perú. Por supuesto, también tenemos a muchos de los investigadores que están también con mucha ansia, también con muchos deseos de poder visitar a nuestros compañeros o que puedan visitar al Perú, como ha sido sugerido por el profesor Maldonado al principio de la presentación.
Great. So now I'm going to move on to talk about my research. And I, as an environmental lawyer, at the moment, I look at my main area of work when I'm not being dean is to look at air quality law. So the law that regulates the quality of the air that we breathe. I also look at climate legislation and climate litigation, which is another area of research where there's a lot of activity. But I wanted to tell you about the main air quality project that I'm working on at the moment. And before I get into that, I think stepping back a bit to the comments that Hector made earlier about the nature of environmental law in South America, in Latin America, what is universal, I think, about environmental law and regulation is it's a body of law that responds to environmental problems. And environmental problems are what I would refer to as collective action problems, by and large. Collective action problems are where there's lots of causes and lots of differentiated impacts. That means they're quite complicated problems to address, but law seeking to get involved and regulate these kinds of issues requires some involvement of the state. And that's what Hector was mentioning before. Whether it's a common law system or a civil law system, environmental law is very rooted in the role of the state in making political and legal choices to address environmental issues, and then how well that legal architecture that might be set up addresses those problems. And all of those steps, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of nuance, a lot of context. But whether you're in a common law system or a civil law system, big collective action problem, intentional action by the state to politically and legally intervene to address that problem, and then quite complex legal architectures from constitutional law to legal doctrines to regulation to address that problem. And as a researcher, our job is, my job and the role of other legal researchers, is to look at that picture, try and understand it, and think about whether it's working or not working. I'm going to stop there, Andres. That was just kind of my general précis about the nature of the law, and then I will get into my research project.
Ahora, antes de poder continuar con mi proyecto de investigación, como abogada ambiental, en este momento, cuando se revisa mi área principal de investigación, de trabajo, yo, por ejemplo, estoy viendo a leyes de calidad de aire, que son el aire mismo que nosotros respiramos. Cuando se trata acerca de legislación y litigación climática, y otra área de investigación, puede ser muchos. También les puedo mencionar acerca de un proyecto de calidad principal y todo, pero también se pueden hablar también de problemas de investigación ambiental y también probablemente de acción colectiva, que se trata en general muchas veces, donde cuando se trata de la investigación o cuando se trata de leyes ambientales, se tiene que revisar sobre todo muchas causas, muchos problemas de impacto, tienen muchas diferentes ramas en donde se tiene que revisar. Es un problema muy complejo cuando se trata de involucrarse en realidad, pero para poder meterse en este tipo de investigación, de este tipo de leyes y regular este tipo de problemas, se está requiriendo también que el Estado se involucre en ello, sea tanto cuando tiene un sistema de ley común o ley civil. La ley ambiental está realizada también problemas del papel del Estado cuando se trata de hacer decisiones tanto políticas como legales para poder lidiar con los problemas ambientales y también cómo se puede proteger legalmente y cómo se puede poner este tipo de protecciones legales también. Estos pasos son muy complejos, tienen mucho contexto en sí, los sistemas tanto civiles, comunes, todo es un problema muy complejo y problema muy colectivo que necesita a veces acción intencional internacional por el Estado para que se pueda intervenir en realidad. Es un problema muy complejo para regular, sobre todo para que uno se pueda meter e investigar. Pero eso es básicamente mi trabajo, en realidad, hacer este tipo de investigaciones para poder ver a la imagen y tratar de pensar si es que algo puede funcionar o no.
Andres, thank you. You are doing an absolutely heroic job. So I really do appreciate it, because this is where it gets a bit more difficult for you, I realize. So I am going to tell you about a study that I've been doing. I'll take about 15-20 minutes to tell you about this. I hope that's all right in terms of timing, but you can stop me, Hector, if you want me to stop sooner.
Yes, Eloise, we have time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Fantastic. So this is a study I've been leading with the United Nations Environment Programme for I started in 2020. And there's been two big outputs. The first one is the report that you can see on screen. Then there's another one that I will get to in a moment, and I'm working on a third report for the UN. But the idea behind this, and why it, for me, was a very exciting research project, very ambitious research project, which I wasn't sure whether we would have a robust methodology in the beginning to do this, but we built that for the UN, is we were asked to look at air quality legislation or laws every country around the world. So that's why it's ambitious. And the purpose of that was to understand the state of air quality law in different countries. Now, I'm going to explain to you a bit about the context and a bit about the method we developed, and then I'll give you some of the findings. So I might stop there, Andres, so that's easy for you. Just a short introduction on the project.
Thank you. Entonces, voy a mencionarles acerca del estudio o investigación que he estado realizando. He estado liderando entonces con el programa de ambiente de las Naciones Unidas, que inició en el 2020, donde se pidió que hubiera dos diferentes conjunciones que eran muy grandes para poder investigar. La primera, que es el reporte que se encuentra en la pantalla, y otro que mencionaré más adelante. Y estoy trabajando en un tercero para la Unión de las Naciones Unidas. La idea detrás de esta investigación es un proyecto que en realidad es muy emocionante, muy ambicioso también, porque también al principio no estábamos seguros si teníamos la metodología lo suficientemente robusta para poder realizarlo al principio, pero es algo que tuvimos que ir desarrollando mientras íbamos también. Nos pidieron también lo que nos pidieron básicamente fue de que revisáramos la legislación para la calidad de aire que había en cada país que existiera alrededor del mundo, lo cual es la razón por la que era muy ambicioso, con el propósito de poder entender las diferentes tipos de leyes de calidad de aire y el estado que se encuentran en los diferentes países, explicando un poco del contexto con la metodología desarrollada y también con lo que hemos podido encontrar debido a ello también.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit about the context for thinking about the laws that regulate air quality globally. One is, unlike climate change or some other elements of environmental protection, there is no global treaty for air quality standards or air quality governance. And the reason for that is a bit about the nature of the problem. So if you think about something like climate change, there is a way in which it's a global problem because it's about the global concentration of greenhouse gases cumulatively. But in air quality, what matters when you're thinking about it as an environmental problem is its local manifestation. And so to the extent that we have any global or international law for air quality law, it is regional. And what I mean by that is clusters of countries that are close to each other. And international law has developed there because air pollution or air quality problems don't respect national boundaries. They can cross national boundaries and cause problems. And when that has happened, and very notably that has happened in Europe, it's also happened in Southeast Asia, countries have come up with agreements about those cross-border air pollution problems. But in general, there is not a global treaty that sets standards for air quality law or an international framework to begin to analyze this kind of issue. Should I pause there, Andres?
Thank you. El contexto es que las leyes que puedan regular la calidad del aire globalmente son, a diferencia de que cuando se trata como el cambio climático o algunos otros elementos de protección ambiental, lo que pasa es que no hay un tratado legal entonces, o global en realidad, para poder un estándar de calidad de aire o para cómo se pueda ganar este tipo de estándar en realidad. La razón de ello es que es la naturaleza en realidad en sí el problema, porque cuando se trata del cambio de clima, este es un problema global, porque se trata de la concentración global de diferentes tipos de gases que cuando se ponen al aire empiezan a subir la capa de ozono en realidad, pero cuando se trata de calidad de aire, eso es más una manifestación local, no global en sí. tanto la internacional, la global para la calidad de aire es algo regional, porque parte de ello es que hay países que están juntos el uno al otro en realidad, y a la internacional y desarrolla porque si hay, por ejemplo, un tipo de envenenamiento de aire o baja calidad de aire, esto no va a respetar las fronteras nacionales en realidad. O sea que puede cruzar de un país a otro país y empieza a causarse problemas, como ha ocurrido tanto en Europa como en el sureste de Asia. Y aunque muchos países han logrado crear acuerdos entre sí, estos han sido más como los que están fronterizos en sí para el problema de la calidad del aire. O sea que, aunque estos acuerdos se pueden poner más regionalmente entre estos países, no se ha formado un tratado global en sí que ponga un estándar para la calidad del aire o sea, para poder analizar entonces la base de ello.
So, but what we do have, whilst we do not have a global treaty as not a legal instrument, we have a global scientific. Oh no, sorry, we're still on the one before, Hector. Just one point before I jump into this. Yeah, I just wanted to point out the role of the World Health Organization, the WHO, and I'm not sure what the Spanish acronym is, but the World Health Organization. What they have established is an international consensus around safe levels of pollutants in air. And what's interesting about that is, whilst that is a scientific norm, that becomes really important in thinking about whether air quality regimes are taking into account the latest scientific understanding in regulating air quality in local areas. So in 2021, the tricky thing in this field is that the science is not standing still, it's dynamic. More and more evidence is being gathered about safe levels of pollutants in air, whether it's particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, heavy metals, sulfur dioxide. Over time, scientific research has found increasingly that the safe levels of these pollutants in air actually is lower than we thought before, because they're finding more health impacts, more public health impacts. And so in 2021, the WHO air quality guidelines were reviewed. It's a big scientific exercise to update the levels at which pollutants can be present in air that we breathe in a way that they think is safe for public health. Now, this is important because it's an international standard, and also because it was making much stricter the levels of acceptable air quality as a scientific consensus globally. And in that, also in those guidelines issued by the WHO in 2021, they made clear that national legislation, national law, is the key institutional tool to implement those air quality guidelines at the national level. So coming back to my research, what we are doing is we are trying to figure out the extent to which national air quality regimes are protecting air quality that is consistent with the WHO guidelines and has an effective governance structure for doing that. Andres.
Ok, ahora lo que nosotros no tenemos es ciertamente no tenemos unas leyes legales que se puedan imponer globalmente. Lo que tenemos es un consenso científico global, impuesto también por la Organización de Salud Mundial. Entonces, y tenemos este consenso que nos estaría dando los niveles seguros para el tipo de envenenamiento del aire en realidad. Normativas científicas que es muy importante para cuando estamos pensando acerca de los diferentes gobiernos en sí, cuando se trata de revisar la calidad del aire en ellos y cómo estos tienen que tomarse en cuenta en realidad cuando se está revisando la calidad del aire. Por ejemplo, La última investigación, el último entendimiento que se tenía científicamente cuando se trata de regular de la calidad del aire en las áreas locales fue en el 2021. Y es algo un poco truculento porque la ciencia no es algo que se mantiene en un solo lugar mientras investigamos, sino que avanza los métodos, la investigación, la información que se obtiene. Y mucha evidencia ya se había obtenido acerca de, por ejemplo, el nitrógeno dióxido, los metales más pesados, los diferentes tipos de gases que estaban poniéndose más al aire. Y lo que se encontró más que nada fue de que el nivel que se consideraba el aire seguro, limpio, era mucho más bajo en realidad de lo que se había propuesto anteriormente. Y esto se puso entonces en nuevas pautas, en realidad, en el 2021, nuevas, nuevas leyes entonces que habían sido investigadas científicamente y ahora, cuando se estaba poniendo con estas nuevas pautas, se veía entonces de que los niveles de aire eran mucho menos seguros para la salud pública de que se había pensado anteriormente. Y esto se puso entonces como el estándar internacional. Y, con este consenso científico global, estas pautas hicieron de que era importante entonces que tanto la legislación nacional y los puntos claves entonces eran que tanto discúlpenme, pusieron entonces de que la legislación nacional eran puntos claves para poder implementar las nuevas pautas en un nivel, no solamente local, regional, sino nacional también. Y y básicamente lo que esta investigación está tratando de realizar entonces es averiguar entonces hasta qué punto se está protegiendo la calidad del aire en diferentes países, hasta qué punto se está siguiendo estas pautas y hasta qué punto entonces los gobiernos pueden lograr seguir estas nuevas pautas con la estructura que estos poseen.
Terrific. So, taking that kind of question into account, how we evaluated air quality laws, as I said, in every country around the world, including, I have to say, Peru. We did look at Peru and all the countries in Latin America. We came up with a model of what we argued would give a robust system of national air quality governance. And this model here, this picture, tries to capture that model. So you can see in this model that at the center of any domestic system of air quality law, as you have in Peru, are air quality standards. This is the most amount of a dangerous pollutant that you can have in the air, and typically there are different levels for different air pollutants, what we often call criteria pollutants, or the main air pollutants: nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and so on, depending on which are the most important pollutants in the particular local context. Now, they sit at the middle of an air quality legal system or an air quality governance system. But as you who are studying law or who are experts in law in different areas will know, it's one thing to have something like an air quality standard in law, like there should be no more than this amount of particulate matter in the ambient air at any given time. But without other legal mechanisms around that, it will not have any effect. And this is the point that Hector was making at the beginning about the difference between the law in the books and the law in fact, about what actually happens. How do you have a system of governance that actually is quite robust in delivering the kinds of obligations that it sets up? So to understand how robust an air quality governance system is in terms of driving implementation of air quality standards on the ground, we look at a number of other legal and contextual factors in our study. So this slide is a bit hard to see, but the green bits in the top half are other elements of air quality law that you might find that support the implementation of air quality standards. And you do have some of these in your national law in Peru. One is that there is a duty on the state to actually achieve those standards. Now, this might seem obvious to the lawyers on the call, but it's one thing to say there is a certain standard in law. It's another thing to say who is responsible for achieving that standard. So when we were doing our research, we looked, is there a duty on anyone to achieve that standard in law? We also looked, and the next green element is about monitoring. We looked whether, because you can have a standard to say you should not have too much of a pollutant, but if you never measure the air pollution, you will have no idea whether it's being met or not. And that can just be a function of the state that they monitor air pollution, or it could be a legal requirement to monitor the air quality. And so we looked at that question. Is there any monitoring going on? We also looked for sanctions or other kind of legal consequences if air quality standards are not being met. Is there a duty to come up with a plan? Is there a penalty? Is there some kind of other obligation on the state to do something to achieve those standards? And finally, in that kind of green section of this model, we looked at whether the public have any rights. Do they have rights to information? Do they have rights to bring claims in court of access to justice if there are air pollution limits are breached? Do they have a right to participate in the development of policies around air pollution? So we look at all of that as the direct questions around air quality governance. And in the bottom half of this model are various more contextual factors about different legal systems. One, which is very important in the grey bar, is whether there's an obligation to review air quality standards in law over time. Again, picking up this point that scientific evidence, as it changes, should be taken into account or can be taken into account. Does the law allow for that? And then there are things like the role of constitutions, which I think you have in Peru, that influence how all of these laws might be interpreted, or whether there is recourse to enforce them, and how. I will pause there because I know that's a lot, Andres. And then I will get into some of our findings.
Cuando tomamos la pregunta en cuenta también, tenemos que evaluar la ley de calidad entonces del aire en los países alrededor del mundo, lo cual hemos hecho, sobre todo en los países como Perú y América Latina, entre los varios que hemos estado revisando. Y hemos creado entonces un modelo en el cual argumentamos que puede dar un sistema robusto para permitir este tipo de leyes. Esta imagen creo que puede capturar la idea del modelo. En el centro vemos un sistema doméstico de calidad del aire y las leyes entonces que le estarían apoyando, como también lo debería haber en Perú entonces, para revisar entonces el estándar de calidad de aire. Y para sobre todo revisar la cantidad que puede haber de envenenamiento también, polución, sobre en el aire, los diferentes niveles, los criterios que se deben estar investigando para ver qué tipo de infectantes puede haber en el aire, los más importantes, dependiendo también cuáles son los más importantes cuando se trata del contexto legal, político. También en los sistemas legales para revisar la calidad del aire, el estudio legal también, y los expertos que pueden haber en el área local también para revisar esto. Porque pensamos que es una cosa el que se pueda tener estándares. Pero también, si es que no hay ningún mecanismo legal alrededor, no tendría mucho efecto en realidad. Este es el punto en el cual se ha mencionado las diferencias entre la ley que puede estar en los libros y la ley como se pone en la vida real en realidad. Porque si es que tenemos un sistema que puede ser, si es que también tiene que verse si es que hay un sistema gubernamental que sea robusto en poder entregar este tipo de obligaciones, o si es que se puede entender en tipo se puede entender qué tipo de sistema se necesita para para poder crear una mejor calidad de aire en realidad. Esto se implementaría un tipo de estándar si es que hay diferentes factores legales que entran en juego y que se tienen que revisar. Pero si podemos ver entonces el sistema aquí, vemos que las partes que están en verde son elementos de que se estaría ayudando para implementar el apoyo para leyes de calidad de aire, los que pueden tener, que se tiene entonces en el Perú. Uno se podría mencionar que es el deber que estatal para poder lograr estos estándares, lo cual puede parecer que sea algo obvio, pero es una cosa decir que es algo estándar en la ley, otra decir que es de quién es la responsabilidad de lograr este tipo de estándares. El deber para obtener en la ley, en realidad de cuentas es algo complejo entonces acerca de quién debe hacerlo, quién tiene el deber. Y la parte en gris se trata del monitoreo en realidad, acerca de cómo se puede tener los estándares, si es que no hay una forma de medir, una forma de poder estar revisando, si es que esto es la función del Estado, si es un requerimiento legal, los deberes, las penalidades, otro tipo de obligación estatal para poder lograr este tipo de estándares. Entonces, hay diferentes puntos, como podemos ver aquí, tanto los verdes como lo gris, y en la sección se puede ver que también se está revisando sobre todo en las otras secciones acerca de que si es que el gobierno en sí tiene la habilidad de que los ciudadanos en él puedan participar en este tipo de obligaciones, si tienen la capacidad de demandar que se revise los estándares, que se puedan hacer, que se cumplan los deberes, si es que pueden participar en el gobierno en sí. Y entonces se trata de ver cómo es que esto se puede tomar en cuenta cuando se trata de la ley, el papel de la Constitución en sí, cómo puede ser interpretada la ley o cómo puede ser enforzada también.
Fantastic. So next slide, and I will just do one more slide and then I will pause and see if there are any questions. So this is, as you saw before, there's a whole report on this with a lot of detail, but here are some of the high-level findings from the study when we looked at air quality laws around the world. And unsurprisingly, the first one is that because really of the fact that legal and regulatory systems work differently in different parts of the world and in different countries, in different legal cultures and different political cultures, there's quite a heterogeneous, so quite a different approach to embedding air quality standards in law and governance around the world. Now, what we found is that that difference is both understandable, but sometimes a little bit risky, because when we probed into it sometimes, that difference could mask or hide weak ambition, and therefore kind of a legalizing of unclean air. So that was something that we thought there's kind of both an understandable reason and a risk around the fact that air quality regimes are cast quite differently in different parts of the world. And again, the similar point, different systems of government will mean that you have different ways of controlling air quality, particularly if you have, say, a federal system of government or a way in which government has different portfolios that might be responsible for different areas and therefore accountable for air quality issues in different ways. One thing that is really kind of a hallmark of this area of law, which we saw in this study, is that it's very technocratic. And what I mean by that is a lot of it is very technical about chemical formulae and numerical standards. And so it can be quite inaccessible, actually, to someone who's not familiar with the scientific jargon. But it also meant that when you looked at some bodies of air quality law, the actual objectives it was trying to achieve in public health terms were not clear. And that's not very helpful for trying to figure out if a body of law is working well or not, if you don't know what the point of it is. We also found that many countries are in the process of developing or reviewing their body of air quality law. And we think that's a good thing, particularly if you've seen once you've seen that in 2021, the WHO, World Health Organization standards are changing. As science changes, these bodies of law also need to update. But we can also see that in some parts of the world, it's because the political and social awareness of air pollution as an issue has meant that governments are more interested and incentivized to update and strengthen their bodies of air quality law. Less positively, we found that in about a third of the countries around the world, air quality was not legally protected at all. And that was very concentrated in Africa and kind of different countries in a bit of a patchwork around the world, but it was notable as a finding. We also found, which is even more worrying, that institutional responsibility for attaining air quality standards, once they're in law, was very weak globally. And that, again, a different kind of way of, again, we've got even, this is where things get even more problematic around the world. Only roughly 33%, so a third of countries, only 1/3 imposed obligations to meet legally mandated standards. And we, drew the conclusion that that's a problem if there's no actual responsibility on any public institution to meet standards. Even if you've got air quality standards in law, they're not going to be worth anything particularly valuable other than sending a signal, which is not without value, but not robust. We found that the obligation to monitor air quality, if it's which may, as I said before, happen as a matter of course in administering scientific measurement by a government, but that we found that the legal requirement to monitor air quality, which you have to figure out whether air quality standards are being complied with, was not legally required in 37% of countries, and we identified that as a problem. And then finally, I've only been talking about air quality standards in the ambient air, so outside, basically outside buildings. But we saw that that's the main focus of national air quality regimes. But that indoor air quality is also a very big public health issue. And the legal regimes for addressing safe levels of air quality indoors is very, very difficult to do, much weaker, much less frequently done. And also, there are real challenges around legal regimes that deal effectively with transboundary air pollution. And I can talk more about that, but that's also a very complicated legal area, because one country might want to put obligations on another country next door, but it doesn't have the jurisdiction unless there's some kind of international agreement between them. So there were the big, very, as I say, in the report, there's a lot more detail, but they're some of the high level findings. Andres, will that slide help you go through that, to remember all that? Andres, are you happy to go through those findings?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that I had unmuted. I apologize.
No. Okay.
All right, I'll start. Entonces, creo que hay diferentes maneras legales, diferentes acuerdos para poder revisar entonces los estándares de calidad del aire alrededor del mundo. Hemos encontrado que algunos se pueden entender, algunos son algo arriesgados, pero algunos de estos acuerdos, algunos de estos estándares de diferentes países, entonces, para poder revisar la calidad del aire, pueden a veces incluso lastimar en sí la misma calidad del aire, porque a veces, tal vez debido a la ambición de cada uno de estos países, o tal vez por alguna razón que no pueden entender, tienden a veces, en alguna forma, legalizar incluso la idea de aire que no esté limpio. Se puede entender que a veces que muchas veces estos tipos de gobiernos puedan tener diferentes ideas en diferentes áreas acerca de cómo se debe regular la pureza del aire en realidad. Pero también es que muchos de estos países tienen gobiernos que no son iguales entre sí, obviamente. Tienen diferentes intereses, tienen diferentes formas legales, tienen diferentes portafolios que lidian con diferentes áreas en sí. Y una cosa que hemos podido encontrar es que en muchas ocasiones, muchos de estas áreas que tienden a enfocarse para poder limpiar el aire o departamentos que se tienden a enfocar para ese tipo de leyes, que se trate de mantener el aire en en una calidad estable o una calidad legal, tienden a ser muy tecnocráticos en el sentido de que se enfocan más en fórmulas químicas, estándares numéricos. O sea, no es muy accesible, la información que tienen o que usan no es muy accesible para la persona en general, en común, usando mucho tipo de palabrería que se usa más en ámbitos científicos o económicos, que en muchas ocasiones pasa por la cabeza de una persona común y corriente. Y se puede ver que entonces muchos de los objetivos no son muy claros entonces. Y no sabemos si ayudaría mucho para el cuerpo legal o si funcionarían muy bien debido a ello. También se ha encontrado de que muchos países que están en vías de desarrollo o que están revisando sus leyes, puede que estarían revisando también sus leyes de calidad de aire, lo cual es algo bueno, como se puede ver con las normas que se pusieron en el 2021, los estándares puestos por la Organización de Salud Internacional. eh, Estos pueden cambiar con el tiempo también. Ah, y muchos de esos países en desarrollo están ahora viendo estas nuevas normas legales y están tratando de cumplirlas, pero también puede de que a veces puede haber uno que otro que no se puede realizar, pero por lo menos están actualizando y tienen que sentirse incentivados para fortalecer entonces los cuerpos de ley para poder realizarlo. Porque hay una tercera parte de países alrededor del mundo en los cuales no hay protección para la calidad del aire, muchas veces concentrados en países alrededor del África o muchos países en diferentes continentes del mundo. Y también se ha encontrado de que muchos de los que tienen la responsabilidad institucional para mantener un estándar de calidad de aire bajo ley tienden a ser muy débiles en realidad estas leyes globalmente. Tienen diferentes maneras de intentar hacerlo y hay muchos problemas cuando tratan de imponerlas alrededor del mundo. Como les menciono, una tercera parte tratan de mantener, eh, le- tratan de mantener el fundamento legal, tratan de mantener las leyes en realidad, pero el problema es de que a veces no hay una respuesta actual o alguna institución pública que pueda tratar de enforzar ese tipo de leyes. No es algo muy robusto, puesto, como se podría decir, y no encontramos mucha obligación para monitorear la calidad del aire también. Puede que muchas veces el medimiento tenga que ser hecho por el gobierno, pero no muchas veces se hace porque ponen el requerimiento mínimo en realidad, y no muchas veces lo hacen legalmente en los países en sí. También, finalmente, cuando se trata de revisar la calidad del aire estándar fuera de los edificios, usualmente ese es nuestro mayor enfoque, pero también tratar de encontrar la calidad del aire dentro de los mismos edificios o dentro de una persona puede ser algo muy difícil legalmente que realizar. No se hace muy frecuentemente y es mucho más débil legalmente que se puede realizar. Hay muchos tipos de obstáculos, muchos desafíos legales en realidad con los diferentes países para que puedan realizarse este tipo de investigaciones. Es un área legal muy compleja, sobre todo por un país que esté tratando de revisar algo que en realidad tal vez ni siquiera tienen el deseo de hacer. También un área muy compleja es cuando se trata de internacionalmente entre un país con otro país. Si es que un país tiene sus leyes para protección de calidad del aire, pero otro país no lo tiene, se podría tener la idea de que tal vez ese país debería imponer sanciones o obligaciones al otro país, pero también no tiene la jurisdicción para realizarlo, a menos de que se forme un acuerdo internacional para ello. Todo tiene que verse con mayor detalle.
Fantastic. So I think I might leave it there for see if people have any questions. But I just wanted to note, Hector, if we look at the next slide, what we did next after we did this big piece of research analysing air quality law across the world, we then came up with something that was kind of translating the findings that we had into something that is meant to be useful for countries who are reviewing their air quality law. And it's a guide on a kind of almost like a checklist of how countries might think about evaluating their own air quality law regimes in light of the research findings that we have. And so this has been the next report that I've led with the UN Environment Programme. And that's been used by various countries around the world to, don't worry about going on to the next one. I think we should pause because it will take too long. But I think it just, if people are interested, they can have a look at that as well. But should I stop there? Did you want to add that bit in, Andres? And then if people have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Creo que vamos a terminar aquí y a ir a las preguntas, pero primero quisiera mencionar que entre la investigación que hemos estado realizando para analizar la calidad del aire alrededor del mundo, hemos creado como un pequeño sistema donde hemos estado tratando de usar lo que hemos encontrado, nuestros hallazgos, y crear algo que pueda ser útil cuando se trata de revisar la ley. Y hemos creado esta lista de normas que muchos países alrededor del mundo estarían usando para que puedan pensar cómo pueden evaluar los diferentes tipos de leyes para la calidad de aire que ahora estarían teniendo que formar. Y esto nos ha ayudado, sobre todo esto es algo que ha sido creado gracias al apoyo del programa ambiental de las Naciones Unidas. Y esto es, si es que alguien está interesado, siempre lo puede leer y lo pueden revisar. Entonces también creo que con eso terminamos y podemos pasar a preguntas.
Thank you. Thank you. Amigos, amigas, hay que resaltar y subrayar que Reino Unido está pues a la cabeza de la experiencia industrial. La ciudad de Londres, una ciudad industrial, el año 1952, las corrientes de viento, el fenómeno meteorológico hizo que la contaminación del aire de Londres sea superior por ese momento meteorológico y se estima que murieron 12.000 personas por el llamado Grand Smoke de 1952. Vemos que 4 años después, el año 56, el Reino Unido dicta una legislación sobre la limpieza del aire. Entonces, para Inglaterra, para Londres, no es algo muy académico, sino es algo muy, muy cercano. Que yo sepa, la ciudad de Lima jamás ha tenido un fenómeno meteorológico que haya incidido que la contaminación se dispare y que quizás este número es muy elevado en Lima, pero distintos factores hacen que ese número sea ocultado por otras enfermedades o dolencias que afectan a la población limeña, ¿no? Pero en el caso de Londres sí conectaron muy bien esto en la década del 50 y tienen en el año 56 una legislación. Eloís, in the history is the key to the future.
Yes.
We can see in the middle 20th century the experience the London with air pollution and the law, no? The Air Clean Act.
Yes.
So
It's a very good
we can see United Kingdom is part of the Union Europe. So we can experience before this continental union, experience after the Brexit, after this, the CAT, connection with the Union Europe.
Yes.
What is your local experience in this, air clean environmental law in your country, in your city? Because we have a local authority, we have national authority. In other countries, we have a states authority and federal authority. So we have 70 years after the big smoke, Great Smoke in middle 20th century in London, no? So what is the London experience in this area, in the law experience?
It's a very good question. So when the United Kingdom, as you mentioned Brexit, which was a big change, but for 40 years, the United Kingdom was legally part of the European Union. And one of the biggest projects of the European Union and its lawmaking was environmental law. So when we had Brexit, the biggest area where we had to change our law was environmental law, because the European project had been so important for the development of environmental law in waste law, in water pollution, in air quality, in nature conservation, in climate change, all of these things. In all of these areas of environmental protection, the European Union had been the main actor in Europe and in the United Kingdom. And the reason for that is the point I made at the beginning, is that environmental problems cross boundaries, and so many of them. And so the European Union was a much more effective actor to introduce laws and regulations to address environmental problems than one country by itself. So that means now in our law in the United Kingdom, we have inherited all of these laws that were developed mainly in the European Union. But whilst they have been designed at that high level, it is the local implementation, the local politics, and the local structures in terms of administration, and particularly how skilled the public servants are that work in environmental agencies and how much money they have, that determines whether those laws are effective. So if you look across Europe, the UK is a country that does quite well in implementing environmental law, because it has strong, relatively strong administrative structures for implementing them. So the lesson we learn from the multi-layered kind of governmental structure of the European Union to UK to local authorities is they are all really important in designing and setting environmental policy, but also in implementing that law down to the local level. And one of the things that my research has found actually that tends to go wrong is that you get a really important thing like an air quality standard set at European level, and then it has to be implemented in a country by the United Kingdom government, in my case. And the United Kingdom government says, oh, this is really difficult to achieve this pollution standard because it's really complex. We have to think about industry, we have to think about transport, we have to think about public opinion. All of these things make achieving the standard really politically difficult and really difficult as a matter of policy. And so sometimes they think it's easier to tell the local authorities to go and fix the problem because they find it too hard nationally. And they say, local authorities, you go and fix the local air pollution problem. Now, the big problem there is local authorities don't have all of the levers, powers, and resources required to deal with a complex problem like air quality. So you get kind of both these very key functions that the different levels of government play. They are important in environmental law, but they can sometimes go wrong because the layers don't work well together.
Thank you, Luis. Andrés, ¿puedes compartir tu comentario, tus preguntas?
Yes, I wanted to ask if I could. Well, you mentioned about most of the issues that there are with air quality laws, and how many countries, about a third you mentioned, were not even following it at some times. I think you mentioned that most of it was in Africa, and then there were some other countries around the world. But what concerns me the most is that are these one of the countries that concerns me the most about this is mostly China, with it being, one of the biggest countries, one of the ones who tend to have, the most population about it. But we have so little information that mostly comes out of it. So I wanted to know if you were able to find
Yeah.
out about information from China as to whether they were following the air quality laws, and if so, if they were having any issues with the other countries surrounding it about it.
So, Andres, what a great question. What I found, you're right. It's difficult to find out sometimes about developments in China, but increasingly it's becoming actually easier, and that's because researchers in China are publishing more in international journals, and increasingly in English. And I know that's easy for me, but it's easier to translate across languages. So there is more and more research, and also I'm actually heading off to Beijing at the end of this month to speak in a conference on environmental law, because it's one of the areas that the government is very, very committed to, and they have pretty strict air pollution laws, and what they are particularly good at, and this has only happened in the last 10-15 years, what they're particularly good at is enforcing those laws. So where there are breaches of air quality laws, they take quite radical action and hold government, particularly regional and local governments, to account through the courts. So they are they had for a long time some very severe air pollution problems in their major cities. Beijing was very notorious, but they have had a real change in the last 10-15 years of political awareness. The Chinese population tend to be very aware of health, public health, their own health, and understand the problems that air pollution causes. So that it's in the kind of the consciousness of the people, I guess, that it's a serious problem. And the government has become much more active in setting standards and implementing them. And I think what would be helpful, I mean, we have a bit of that in the research that we've done, but I would love to see some more studies that are more available internationally about some of the success stories actually in Chinese environmental law, because they're in a complicated place on climate change, but on many areas of environmental law, very progressive, because they see the economic future in environmental protection, as well as the health of their population being very important. So it's a very interesting case study.
Okay. All right, then I guess that's it. But and one more question, if I may. Would you say that most countries that do not tend to follow the air quality laws, would those countries be considered more like the already developed countries, or perhaps countries in development?
It's such again another great question, and I think it's not straightforward, the answer to that. I mean, in some senses, and that's where I kind of pointed out the issue across Africa. In some areas of in the developing world, there's just no tradition of regulating air quality, no infrastructure, no monitoring, because that's expensive. And so they're kind of behind the curve in a quite a big way. But beyond a kind of a cluster, I guess, of developing countries that just have not paid attention to air quality or regulating it, then it becomes quite a mixed picture. So there are some developed countries that have terrible air quality, and they might have some laws around it, but they do not implement them. And some parts of Europe are a good example like that, where there are still very high pollution levels, poor infrastructure, poor monitoring, and not very good governance overall of air quality. Then there are other, and then there are other parts of the developed world that have very sophisticated air quality regimes, and America has always had quite a good regime, and the European Union has a very advanced model, but it's the implementation that shows you really whether there's a good air quality regime. And many countries, both developing and developed, politically will make the decision not to prioritize the implementation of air quality law because it can be expensive, because it undermines industry, usually for reasons of economic policy. And so it's more about the political choices that are made rather than the stage of development, with the caveat at the beginning that it's expensive to set up an air quality monitoring system by the state, and that means some countries that don't have many resources just don't get very far in this kind of area of regulation.
I see. Thank you very much, Mia.
All right.
Manuel, Matías, ¿tienes algún comentario, alguna pregunta, por favor?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Knight. Originally, I had two questions before this meeting began, two questions about environmental law, but I think it's a question formed in my mind when I was listening to your presentation. So the question is as follows. One of the biggest contributors to the air quality problem here in Peru is the fuel emissions. Linking that to the basic family basket cost, it has increased by 22% since 2019. A regulation on the fuel quality will decrease the air pollution, but also increase the basic family basket cost even more. How do you think that should be balanced?
Well, look, that's a question for a politician, Matthias, not for an legal academic. But I think you're right. One of the principal causes of air pollution in many countries is traffic, transport, cars, kind of that. It's not the only cause, but it's a very frequent one. The approach taken in many countries to that problem is to think about, it is to introduce very specific kinds of regulation. So the things that are tried in some countries are to regulate the fuel that goes into cars, that it can't be too dirty, if you like, is to regulate the cars themselves and how they're designed. So you can't, in Europe, for example, you can't sell a car unless it meets a certain technical standard that reduces its environmental impact. And those two things have been tried in lots of countries and are, especially changing fuel types has a big impact on local air pollution. But the thing that really changes the game is changing how people travel. So that rather than getting in cars, that they use more sustainable public transport. So that's an issue that we would refer to in English as an urban planning problem. So how you plan cities and how you plan environments then gives people choices about how they move around that are less polluting. Now that's expensive, it's long term, and it requires a lot of political attention and prioritization, but it's how you develop a kind of a much more sustainable long-term approach. If you take a country like, to pick an example, like Singapore, which has a very sophisticated public transport system, that is one way in which they minimize their air pollution. Now, they're a very rich country, so it's easier, but it's those three. If you're thinking about transport, fuel, car design, and then change the mode. We call that modal shift. You change the mode of transport. And law has a role to play in all of them, but politics has a very big role to play, because the individual who has to get from A to B, the person who has to get to work or drop their child at school or go shopping, they will only have a certain set of choices. And unless those choices change, as you say, you know, things get more expensive. Unless those choices change in a meaningful way for individuals, then you continue to have quite a, in aggregate, quite a serious air pollution problem.
Okay, thank you so much.
Amigos, amigas, ¿tienen comentarios,
question.
tienen preguntas para el profesor Scotford? ¿Tienen comentarios, tienen preguntas?
Sí,
Yes.
una pregunta, por favor.
Sí, por favor.
¿Cómo la contaminación natural que soportamos en el sur peruano por las erupciones de los volcanes y que invade las áreas urbanas y la respiración de los seres humanos? Gracias.
Eloís,
Yes.
bueno, muchas gracias por tu pregunta. There are challenges. We are in challenge because the law is a master to population, to society. This is the law show the goal, no, the objective, the society. So, but could be this objective is very distant. The dialogue inside the society between the middle class, the laboring people, the ruling class, and the enterprise, the business could be the key to find a way to walk to these objectives. No, is the law very distant? The fact is a problematic situation. So we need more dialogue because it could be for the Parliament or Congress. This topic could be very difficult to see because could be the Parliament and Congress people very pay attention to the economics, no, to the poor people, to need a work. So the air pollution could be the secondary or third importance. But is these people, these political people, see the air pollution in their homes, in their house, could be changed. The attitude could be changed, the attention, because the air pollution is different to the air movement, the current air transport. The air pollution could be the ruling class place, ruling class homes, because the air movement, air currents no make difference in the city, no? So could be this situation, the political, the authorities give more attention on this law. But the other problem is the economy. Because we have industry with different experience, with different attitude. The industry find the best situation, the less legal legislation, environmental legislation. So in Peru has experience with Loroya, international enterprise who contaminate the air, and the state finish and cut connection with the country, and the country start and case in the international court, but it's a legal process, no? Many years, and finally it's difficult to the international company to pay any any or transfer any result to the solve defense aspect. So in your experience, this is a moment in long work, no? This work starts before the two, no? This work started in the Industrial Revolution, I believe, no? In the middle 19th century, some medicine, some physicians, no, pay attention to this connection between the air and death, air and disease, and well, start this work, no. In this moment, we have 1 century and a half the experience, but is in this moment, 21st century, is very difficult, this area. In the international
Yes. So
politics, we can see the Western approach, the Brussels approach, the London approach, or Washington approach is different in 20th century. In 20th century has more power. In 21st century, we can see the other powers. This power is a different approach, could be more attentive, pay attention to the economic, even the health, even the society. No, this is our time. This is our challenge. So, in this, in our society, in our time, how do you project your research? How do you connect with the United Kingdom and Union Europe in this moment?
Great question. And I think, Hector, this might be my last question, if that's all right, because it's getting quite late for me here in London. But I think it's a really good question. And I can see there's a question from Paola in the chat about kind of environmental history, which connects to some of the points that you're making. So you made 2 points. One about the divide between people who are more well off and people who have less resources in a society, and the priority that might lead politically to addressing environmental problems. And if we think about air quality, I think you were breaking up a little bit, but I think you were getting at the point that if wealthy people in their homes either feel there's a problem with air pollution or don't feel there's a problem with air pollution, that might dictate how much political priority the problem has, as in the law of a country. Now, what's very interesting is in the United Kingdom, there was a big moment in 1956, and here's a bit of UK environmental history. In 1956, or a bit before that, when on the back of a lot of industrialization, as you say, a huge amount of pollution had built up in the United Kingdom as a result of factories and industrial practice. So the local population was suffering from the economic progress. And what led to a big change, what was called the Clean Air Act in 1956, is all the rich people and all the powerful people were getting sick from the air pollution, including the members of parliament who could not meet in the Houses of Parliament in London because there was such a thick smog in London. And at that point, the impact of the environmental problem was unavoidable for the people in power. They had to address it. Now, what lesson do we learn from that history and take to the modern day, where you're quite right, the industrialization is not just a national phenomenon, it's a transnational phenomenon, where people with money and companies with money cross boundaries and come in to countries with their foreign investment and their industrial plans, and they may or may not care about the environmental quality of local populations. The lesson we learned from the history of industrialization is that unless very carefully designed, industrial practices that are involved in economic progress tend to have environmental externalities. That means that when we do industrialize and we do introduce new economic projects, designing in environmental protection as part of that leads to sustainable economic development. And that's what sustainable development is all around. So it's hard to do because it's often more expensive. And that's why governments or investors who want to make money or have economic growth quickly will often take shortcuts that compromise environmental quality. But that shortcut is very short-sighted. And the lesson of history is it comes to harm local populations. The big challenge, which I think you were getting at, was around the inward foreign investment and countries that invest in other countries to make money that may not care about environmental protection. European nations and America, well, who knows, United States of America, who knows what's happening there, but up until recently took environmental protection very seriously. They are not necessarily the major players in foreign investment at the moment. And other countries that are investing heavily in other countries have less commitment to international, to environmental protection standards internationally. And that is where I think the most interesting area of research is not what I do actually, but some of my colleagues here do at UCL, where you look at the interaction between environmental standards and finance, international finance. Because where there are increasingly standards of ESG, environmental standards built in private standards to the issuance of international finance. And I think that's where we need to be putting our attention to make sure when money flows for capital projects that there are considerations of environmental protection, particularly to protect local populations that have industrial projects thrust upon them by international investors.
Thank you. Amigos y amigas, pueden ver por el chat, se ha compartido el link de University College London, el link de la Facultad de Derecho de la universidad, así como el link del research, de la investigación que se hace en la facultad y de distintos grupos, como el grupo de ley ambiental, ¿no? De derecho ambiental que tiene la Universidad College de London. Muy atentos a partir de estos links, que ustedes puedan ver mayores intereses y, por qué no, proyectar actividades. Eloise, I'm sure that the LIM experience, the Sangmar experience, could be very important for your students. They could be undergraduate or graduate study. Yes, of course, for you on the any professor, not only environmental law, in the other areas, the law faculty. Peru, in 20th century, in South Pacific, the principal economy was Chile. So really not very logical, the connection between London and Santiago, London. In 21st century, it's a different situation. In last year, new mega ports open in North Lima, near to Lima. China, seeing Peru, similar a bridge to Brazil. Brazil, in this moment, the 8th or 7th economy of the world. China, Peru increased the projection, could be the first economy in South Pacific, in South America. So I'm sure the contacts, the change, connection between London and Lima, the public university, the Lima, San Marcos University, and your university is more open than the famous Oxford at Cambridge, because it's more... in the seminar, a good friend is from King College.
I used to work there. Very good university. Yeah.
And her wife from Oxford. So the same professor, but a different experience in the London and the Oxford University. So I suppose in general, no, all the London University and different universities similar, no? It's a special experience to the people, to the other countries. So I sure this is contact between the University College London and St. Mark University is very probably in these years, in this 20th century. So I would like if you project some visits to Lima, to St. Mark, will be important. We have time. In 10 years, our city celebrates 500 years foundation. We have time to see how to connect our experience in environmental law, and yes, of course, the experience in the London, your university, and your specific experience, no? To think how to help the people, no? The idea is universities connect to the local community. Yes, it's very difficult, this topic, because it's the states, communities, and business. Yes, it's a very, very big exam, no? This environmental law. But this is part, I believe, this the learning the society, no? The develop the society in this 21st century. The connect the health, the economy, the authorities, communities.
Agreed.
Amigos, amigas, ¿tienen algún comentario, alguna pregunta?
Okay. I think I will have to thank you, Matthias. They're very good questions. I will have to bring this to a close because I am due to leave my office now. If that's all right, Hector.
Yes. Amigos, amigas, por favor, pueden prender sus cámaras. Estamos dando una captura de la sesión.
Thank you very much. I've really, really enjoyed this presentation today. And
Wait a
big
moment, please, Eloy, for the picture. Wait a
Oh, we
moment.
have a picture. Amazing.
Yes, yes. Wait a moment, please.
That's a great idea.
Por favor, amigos, pueden encender sus cámaras un momento.
Matthias, your questions are very good, I can see in the chat, but that would take quite a lot of discussion.
Germany is near to London. Could be
I know. Yeah, it's
Matthias
even later.
visits you. Next.
Yes, you're very welcome to visit Matthias. We can discuss those questions.
Well, un momento, vamos a contar 1, 2, 1, 2. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
I hope that we can, with your faculty, continue activities in general with your university. I hope that you can visit Lima in the future.
Elise, can we have your email for future questions, please?
Sí,
Yes.
un momento, José, sí, sí.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Jose. You asked a good question. Okay. It's been such a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. And Andres in particular, you've been remarkable. He's disappeared, but so impressive. Very hard job.
Thank you very much.
Andrés, por tu apoyo. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Hector. Thank you
Gracias,
so much.
profesor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.